Sit at the table here. Moses and Robert, utape. Can we ask Sophie to do a blessing for the food? She's going to go stand by the food to do the blessing. Okay, the food has been blessed. Don't all race at once, okay?
We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Everyone hear me?
12.
Hi, I was just saying everyone's welcome to eat if you'd like, and we're going to get things going in 2 minutes. Good evening, and thanks for joining us today. We'd like to say a special welcome to Grand Chief Keewatinook for allowing us to use this space, which was where the KTC is holding their annual General Assembly this week. So this is the riding election forum for Churchill, Keewatinook Aski. We had invited all of the candidates that are represented in this riding. Only Niki, Ashton, and Rebecca Chartrand were able to join us today. My name is Jill, and I'm here representing Manitoba Keewatinowi Okimakanak.
And I am Tim Falster from the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Youth Council. I am we're honored to be your co-moderators for tonight's forum. And we would like to give a big thank you to Grand Chief Walter Westesikut for agreeing to allow us to host this event here at the Mamawawitak Friendship Center in Thompson, where the Keewatin Tribal Council has just begun their 3-day annual General Assembly. So thank you all for being here.
This evening is about amplifying the voices of First Nations people. This is a riding that spans 42,000 kilometers. It's massive, and more than 60% of the people in this riding are First Nations. So this is about the issues, the priorities that First Nations people have in this riding, and that will be the focus of this debate today. We are going to ask people to engage with the candidates later on after some questions are asked. We also have people watching online, and we thank them for that. And they can comment in the Facebook chat portion of their live feed if they'd like, and some of those questions will be asked as well. We also have some recipe cards and some pens at the front table. So if we don't get to your questions in the audience, you are welcome to write down a question, and we will make sure that the candidates get those, and we will answer them again on our Facebook feed. So this is MKO, KTC, and AMC.
So with that, to begin our evening in a good way, we would like to invite Grandmother Marie Ballantyne to lead us in a prayer.
Ikusani, mama oyo taimao. Kinanas komitnan kisagaw hiya. Wapanatang tisadigasan maski mahigan tutim. I thank Creator today for this beautiful day. My name is Morning Star. I belong to the Medicine Wolf clan, my father's clan. I thank Creator for the gift of breath today. All of us should. We thank Him for everything that He has loaned to us, for we understand nothing is given to us. So we are merely servants of His great mystery, and that's why we're here. We have come to celebrate a new beginning, a new understanding. We ask Him for that greatness to bless every one of us here. We say thank you for today. We thank you for our children, our families, our home fires that we have left to come here, to come and listen. We thank Him for the great mystery of life. Look after our elders, Creator. Watch over the leadership. In all due respect for all leaders, it is a great privilege to be able to express that in our own language, in our own way of understanding. Bless the people that are in a process of running for a good, we always say, a good race when people gather. in a good way. We were never people that disobeyed your great mystery, Creator. We followed it the best way we knew how. And we thank you so much for the food, for the energy that's here, for the positive way of thinking. And we want to say, hi to that greatness. For the leadership that are here, the Grand Chiefs that are here, for everybody that has come here in representation, look after them and bless them. Hi. Kasani.
You can just welcome the chiefs.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Grandmother Marie. And we'd like to welcome the Grand Chiefs up for some brief comments about what we'll be doing here today and the focus of this debate. Grand Chief?
Thank you. Thank you, Jill and Tim, for agreeing to be moderators. I want to thank the candidates for Churchill, Keewatinook Aski for agreeing to come and participate. Niki, Ashton, and Rebecca Chartrand. Keewatinook Aski, Northern Land, that's what that means. Most people say the name of the riding without understanding what it means. Our people, we have a spiritual connection to the land. Without it, we are nothing. In my lifetime so far, I have not had a good experience with Canada's democracy. As a child, I was incarcerated at an institution of assimilation in Dauphin, Manitoba. It was known as Mackay Indian Residential School. In March of 2023, our 11 nations declared a regional state of emergency, largely due to the impacts of that legacy of Indian residential school, the legacy of genocide in this country. I want to hear what our candidates will say about elevating our people out of poverty, elevating our people out of the sickness of colonization. There have been many impacts. We live with them today. So we come here together today to ask these delegates or these candidates certain questions that will help us formulate a position as we go to the polls on April 28 or in Thompson on April 18. I believe that's when the advance polls start. For our people out there, consider our history in this country, our state right now, our current state right now. Families continue to be torn apart. Our people die of overdoses every day. Many of our people continue to reside in institutions, penal institutions. Those glimpses of hope are few and far between for our people. When we go to the polls, I want to go there and put my X beside the name of a person that will walk in truth. Nothing can ever stray you from the truth. And for those people out there that won't accept the truth, that won't learn about the truth, I have pity on you. My experience has taught me to hate. I have changed that perspective to that of love, encouragement. This here is about our lives. It's It's not a popularity contest. Thank you.
Grand Chief Sethi.
Tanse, het uitemak niet sanak, de wagumaga het naskumit na ogagino. Kapevitap miag kichigegon, ja na muchigate Keewatinook Aski, kitaskino. In specimeneni tenista, e pevichiu yanuta. Na specimestai pagusene monista, kita wichiguishia guta Keewatinook, kawigiag. Pagusene monmina, kita ki Atoskago ako kapempatatsik, animenigon kaisi paguseni mag kitinimina nagulse. I first want to thank the Keewatin Tribal Council for allowing us to have this forum during their time of their annual General Assembly. Thank you, Grand Chief Stesikut, for facilitating this with us. And I'm thankful for the moderators that are here, Jill McAshon and Tim Falster. I know that you will do a good job. And I also want to acknowledge the leadership that are here. Their leadership from our Northlands, and there are counselors here because they have a vested interest in what happens in our territory. They see the importance of this process because it pertains to our lands, our waters, and our people. This is very important because every time there's an election, there is always a platform that is presented to us. There's a platform that is used to try to garner our support. But right now, the time is critical. We need more than just words. We need more than just rhetoric. We want to see action. We want to see transformation in our north, in the areas of health, child welfare, public safety, policing, and education. Those are very critical, and we need to see investments in the north. Canada is wealthy because of the resources extracted from our north. Manitoba is wealthy because of the resources extracted from our north. It's time that the First Nation people have an opportunity to have that revenue coming to our First Nations, to empower our leaders, to empower our nations, to be able to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, and have a genuine treaty relationship with the Crown. Right now, we have contribution agreements. That's not a treaty relationship. We have all kinds of MOUs. Those are not treaty relationships. We want nation-to-nation relationships with the Crown and government. And I'm hoping that the candidates that are here will commit to that process because it's important. It's important. Our people rely on that treaty to be able to move us forward. And I want to welcome the candidates. Niki, Ashton, thank you for being here. And also Rebecca Chartrand, thank you for making yourself available to answer questions and also to share of the ideas that you have for us. But ultimately, it's about change, transformation, no more rhetoric, no more games, just action for our north. Egusanig, inanaskamit now. Hi.
And Grand Chief Wilson, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kyra Wilson, Grand Chief for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. I just want to say thank you to everyone that's here today. Thank you to our leadership. Thank you to Grand Chief Stesikut for allowing this forum to take place during your assembly this week. So miigwech for that, and I acknowledge KTC and MKO Grand Chief Sethi for this great work and partnership and a very important discussion. Thank you to the two candidates that are here today. There's a lot of questions that we we have as First Nations people in regards to this federal election. You know, the question is always, who are the candidates? How are they going to represent our voices at the table? And these are very important questions that our people are, you know, seeking the answers to this. And so this is one of the ways that we're wanting to ensure that our people are involved, our leadership are involved, and you're able to ask these important questions. So I know today we will be asking questions to the candidates. You know, today we are gathered here in Thompson, Manitoba on Treaty 5, and I'm just really excited for this discussion. You know, when we think about this riding, and thank you so much, Grand Chief, for the teaching surrounding the actual meaning to Churchill, Keewatinook Aski, and what that means, because I actually didn't even know that. And so it's really important that we understand the knowledge and the teachings that we receive from the language and of our people. And so when you think about this riding, it holds many of our First Nations communities, so it's important that we're a part of these discussions. And, you know, this riding actually has the highest number of First Nations voters in this country, which is, you know, so important that we're having this forum today, and I'm sure that there's other discussions that are happening with other candidates based on their own ridings. So, you know, today is about accountability. It is about listening to our nations. It's about listening to our people, because there are so many very important issues and priorities that we have as First Nations people, especially when we deal with the federal government. We need to make sure that we are voting with informed decisions based off of, you know, what we're hearing. And we have so many priorities as First Nations people. And so when I think about the discussion today, you know, I think about some key questions that I have. And so when we talk about, you know, candidates within this federal election, how are you going to support treaty implementation? A very important discussion, because if we figure out the answer, how are we going to implement the treaty promises and rights that we have as First Nations people, then we will have many solutions to the problems that we see today. You know, another question is, how are you going to protect the lands and the waters? Because right now there's a lot of discussions that are happening provincially and federally where, you know, different industries want to come in to our territories, our ancestral lands, and they want to extract resources. And so we need to make sure that our people, our leadership, our nations are a part of these conversations. And sometimes that doesn't happen. A lot of the time that doesn't happen. And so when I think about, you know, so many of the issues that we're dealing with right now, it's because First Nations are not a part of the discussions. Decisions are being made without our voices at the table. You know, decisions are happening without our families and our leadership at the table. So we need to make sure that we are voting for, you know, a party, for a candidate that is going to listen to us, that is going to hear us, and that is going to advocate for all of our people to be at the table. You know, I believe that there's so much talk about, well, why do I need to vote? You know, our people are always saying, why do I need to vote? Well, right now, this is the system that we are a part of, and it's important that we get involved, and it's important that we vote. And until, you know, we see a different system, this is what we're dealing with today. So I just want to say it's important that our people get out and vote. Do your research. Look at who is doing the work. What are the priorities that they're talking about? And please get out and vote. Our federal election is on April 28th. So I want to say thank you again to the candidates for being here today, and thank you to our leadership for allowing this space. And I look forward to the conversation this evening. Miigwech.
We meet our candidates, Tim will introduce. We just wanted to quickly go over the rules, which both candidates were given earlier. So there will be no interruptions. This is respectful discourse at all times. There was a coin toss that we had just done earlier that will determine the order, which will rotate as the questions are asked. There will be a Q&A section here after opening remarks, which will last 5 minutes. Q&A will be 2 minutes response from each of the candidates. I think we're starting with Rebecca.
So let's now welcome the candidates who are seeking to represent the Churchill Keewatinook Aski riding. I think you had mentioned already each candidate will have 5 minutes to deliver their opening statement. We will begin with Rebecca Chartrand.
All right, thank you. Bonjour, Tanseanin, Wapnun Indigenakas, Wabashke, Mangandudam, Pine Creek, Duck Bay, Bogarn, and Dunji, Winnipeg, Utenang. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Chartrand, and I'm happy to be here seeking to get your vote for the Churchill Keewatinook Aski riding. I don't have any real notes prepared because I think it's important just to speak from the heart. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm Anishinaabe, I'm Innu, I'm Métis. I come from Pine Creek First Nations, which is Treaty 4. My son and his family come from Treaty 5, York Landing. I've lived and worked in different parts of the riding, right from some of my first work days. I've worked out in Pongassi, Little Grand, Lac Brochet. My mom has also worked and lived in the riding. She's worked in St. Teresa Point, and she's also worked in York Landing. And as Indigenous peoples, we have relatives all across Manitoba, all across this nation. That's because that's how we are as a people. We move, we intermarry, and a lot of our trade routes went from north to south. And so I think it's important to recognize that I am Indigenous, I am First Nation, I am a treaty person. So the issues that we're dealing with in this riding are issues that we live through. We live and breathe the need for reconciliation. So we know these issues really well. I want to say that I'm not here to be a politician. I never desired to be a politician. I never desired to run. But the issue that I ran on initially was the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. I have 2 friends that have been murdered, and we still have not found their killer. The first one was Glenda Morrisseau in 1991. 2 weeks later, she was found murdered in Winnipeg and St. Boniface. My other girlfriend who was murdered was Joanne Neepin, and that was around 10 years ago, and we still have not found her murderer. I also have a cousin that went missing when she was 14, and she has still not been found to this day. So these are the issues that draw us to advocacy. They draw us to want to see change. So I'm not here to be a politician, I'm here to get results. I'm here to get the kind of results that we want to see in our community. So when we think about the issues that we're dealing with in our communities, I ran in 2015, and a lot of the issues are still the same. We're still seeing a housing crisis in our community. We're still seeing homelessness. In 2015, there wasn't the type of homelessness that we see now in our communities. You know, our communities, we're outgrowing the size of our communities, and that has to change. We're outgrowing the water and sewage. We can't add more homes to our communities because there just isn't the land base. And every community that I go to, I hear the same thing over and over. And some of us are connected to 1 or 2 communities, so we go back home to our communities, we get to visit people. But I have to tell you, it is such a privilege to go to as many communities as we've gone to date. There are 67 communities in this riding. This riding is bigger than Ukraine itself, the country of Ukraine. It is the 5th largest riding in the world. And so that is a huge undertaking in of itself. So we've been on the road consistently for 2 weeks. We visited 33 communities. I just got back from the Island Lakes communities. We went to St. Teresa Point, Wasagamak, and Garden Hill. We still have 34 communities to get to. And I have to say as well that as Indigenous people, we do not come from money. So when you run campaigns, you have to raise your own funds. So we would love to get out to every single community, but the fact is we probably won't because we don't have enough time or enough money to raise funds to get out to the most northern, remote, isolated communities. Communities like Tadouli, Lac Brochet, Shamattawa, because the winter roads have now closed. And we know that because of global warming, that these roads are, the lifespan of the roads is also shrinking. So that's adding additional challenges for our communities. So I also want to talk a little bit about some of the work that I have done. I have 2 children. I run my own business. It's called Indigenous Strategy Alliance. I've held executive positions. I have a master's in education. After I ran in the last election, I really put my energy into trying to advance some of these things that were important to our people. So I was the driver behind getting up the first Ojibwe bilingual school in Winnipeg. I had all that energy and it needed to go somewhere. And so I'm really happy with some of the things that I've done over the years. I feel that this work is important because we need to see results. You know, we've seen over the last 17 years, you know, an NDP representation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Niki, Ashton.
Tansei, good evening. I'm honored to be here on Treaty 5 territory, the traditional territory of the Nishnawasi Cree Nation. Elder Ballantyne, thank you. Thank you to the Keewatin Tribal Council, Manitoba Keewatinowi Okimakanak, and the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs for organizing tonight's debate. Thank you to the Mamawituk Friendship Center for hosting us all today. You are an organization that is at the heart of our community here in Thompson. This is an important election for our region. It's an election where there are extremely important issues at stake. The choice you make about who is going to represent you in the House of Commons couldn't be more important. There's been attention on the economic crisis caused by Donald Trump. And our NDP message is that we need to stand strong and push back. But we know that there are ongoing crises in our region, crises that many of you in this room deal with on a daily basis. We need a strong voice to fight for our region. I want to be clear. You make a difference when you support the NDP because the NDP makes a difference for us. Whether it's the provincial NDP government or the federal NDP, we fight for our region. The NDP is rooted in our communities. I'm proud to work with MLAs Eric Redhead, Amanda Laughlin, Ian Bushy, and Tom Lindsay. We're extending the legacy of the NDP, working on extending all-weather roads, moving forward on healthcare, investing in our region. One thing we know is that nothing happens without working together, working in partnership. Let's talk about the issues. Infrastructure, the need to further the all-weather road network, the need to build an airport in Wasagamak, the need to deal with the housing crisis. And I'm proud of the NDP's push in this minority parliament to get more money for Indigenous housing, but much more is needed. The need to expand healthcare. I'm proud to have fought ISC as it understaffs nursing stations throughout the north, pushing to get them to do better. I'm proud to have supported the push for the health center in Cross Lake and the hospital in Norway House and health services across our north. And youth, an issue close to my heart. It was the NDP that supported Jordan River Anderson's family in its fight for Jordan's principle. We fought against ISC's proposed cuts to JP last year, and we have been clear Jordan's principle must be expanded. We need action on the drug crisis, policing, treatment supports, and supports for our youth, including recreation, because we know that recreation in regions like ours saves lives. And land. We know that at the core of sovereignty and prosperity is the need for land back, the foundation of the nation-to-nation relationship. Now more than ever, we need a strong voice and a clear choice on Indigenous and Northern issues. Let's look at the choices. I'm not surprised that the Conservative candidate didn't show up here. We all know where the position is on Indigenous issues. But we're increasingly finding out what Mark Carney's position is on Indigenous issues. His record as an investment banker in business, his company's record on tax evasion, depriving Canada of billions of dollars that could have gone to healthcare and housing on First Nations. But in particular, his company's record in fighting First Nations in court, fighting Mississauga First Nation in court over the 4 hydro dams his company owns on their territory. I spoke with Chief Niganob. They've been clear. Mark Carney's company, quote, cut them off at the knees. Now Carney, as Liberal leader, is talking about cutting spending. We all know what that means. Cuts to the funding that we need in regions like ours. I want to contrast that with the NDP. We've already come out for an all-weather road, expansion of Jordan's Principle, more investment in healthcare, and we will be announcing more in the next few days. Our NDP leader has called out the other national leaders for completely ignoring reconciliation and the issues impacting First Nations in this election. The other 2 leaders have been clear that they will fast-track resource development. This could be a disaster for our region. Mark Carney's Liberals on reconciliation aren't part of the solution. They are part of the problem. We have to make our voice count. I'm proud to be from our north. Thompson is my home community. I'm proud to have spent time visiting in communities year-round on a regular basis. And I'm particularly proud to work with so many people in this room and those that came before you.
Thank you, Niki.
Thank you.
Time's up.
Thank you, Nikki. We'll now move into our moderated question period. Each candidate will be asked the same question and given 2 minutes to respond. The order will alternate with each question.
So you can take a sip of water, Niki Ashton, because you're up first here. You were just speaking about all-weather roads and infrastructure. Well, that's going to be our first question here. We all know that many, many First Nations in the north are cut off from main highways. The AO Communities Island Lake has more than 10,000 residents disconnected. So that cuts off their access to health care, food, emergency services, etc. The First Nations leaders are advocating for an east side road, 252 kilometers, I believe. They want this now. They've been fighting for it for a number of years. Will your party commit funding immediately to start this project, and what dollar amount will you allocate to begin immediate construction?
Absolutely. Our leader, Jagmeet Singh, has been clear that he supports the construction of all-weather roads. This is an issue, in fact, he had the opportunity to discuss as well with Grand Chief Westesikut and KTC just a few days ago. And I have been clear since when I was elected that this is a priority issue in our riding. I'm proud of the fact that it was the NDP provincial government that got the work started in partnership with First Nations along the east side to get working on the all-weather road. And unfortunately, the PCs cut funding to that. And unfortunately, the Liberals haven't been the partner we need. It's been critical to see this kind of investment in our region. Not only is the cost of living crisis getting worse in communities across our region, but the impacts of climate change are making it more and more, less and less, dependable on the winter roads. Not only, obviously, during winter time and the spring, but also we saw it this summer as Bunabonabee faced a wildfire, that got so close to the community. Things could have been much different if people had the opportunity to evacuate on their own, and we know that things can and should be much different for people living on the east side and in remote communities, including in the far north, Brochet, Lac Brochet to Dooley Lake. We have to be clear that building a stronger Canada means building all-weather roads in our region, and that is my message. That's my message in terms of working with the NDP provincial government that has made commitments on this front. including the access road in Wasagamak that's being worked on right now. But we also need to see the federal government involved. And we haven't seen the Liberals show the interest that we need them to see given the severity of the issue. As your MP, if re-elected, I would fight hard for the all-weather road that we in the NDP support
Thank you,
100%.
Nikki. Your time is up. Rebecca Chartrand.
All right. Testing? Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear myself. Yeah, definitely the all-winter roads is a major issue for this province, specifically for the Churchill Keewatinook Aski riding. This province has the highest number of remote, isolated communities than any other province across the country. In 2015, there were 23 remote isolated communities out of 92 across Canada. We've seen that there are now 19, so there has been some investments in our communities, and we have to make sure that those investments continue. So there is an annual amount that is put into all-weather roads, but we know that that's not enough. There's $7 million. The federal government, this Liberal government, is looking at making commitments to all-weather roads. The Mark Carney platform is not fully out yet, but this is definitely a big issue that's been on the table for a number of years. So when we think about some of the infrastructure or some of the developments that we're looking at in the north, so the idea of developing the port, developing the rail line, perhaps even developing 2 ports, we're going to need infrastructure, we're going to need roads, and that has to be done hand in hand with First Nations. We need to make sure that we're the problem solvers of the issues that we're dealing with in our communities. So we know that East Side Road development project, it ended as soon as the provincial Conservatives got in. So we need to pick that up and make sure that we continue with that infrastructure. I was just in Wasagamak yesterday, and they were showing me the road that was built on that East Side Road Authority and where it ended. And that ended as soon as the provincial Conservatives got in. So we need to make sure we move forward, and you have to make sure you do that with a party that's actually going to be in government. The NDP will never be in government federally. That is why you need to vote
Thank you,
somebody
Rebecca.
in
Your time is up.
that will be in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. You could have your sip of water as you will be next also. The second question will be on Jordan's principle. Rebecca? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Although the House of Commons unanimously adopted Jordan's principle in 2007, the federal government has faced criticism for First Nations for its inadequate implementation. Delays, policy changes, and legal interpretations have hindered the timely provision of essential services to First Nations children. Will your party legislate an enforcement mechanism that holds federal departments accountable for implementing a child-first principle to eliminate delays, funding cuts, rejection letters, and will you ensure jurisdictional disputes never impact service delivery again?
Yes, I think this is an important issue for our communities. I do want to start by saying that since 2016, over $8.1 billion has been invested through Jordan's principle. So this has resulted in approvals of more than $7.8 million of products, services, and supports for First Nations. It includes medical equipment, speech therapy, mental health services, and learning supports that are essential for our children. So this has actually been a 367% increase in requests since the program's inception. So this is a powerful indicator. It shows that families are trusting this program and they're relying on it. But the surge that has come in, the demand, the processing delays, all of those backlogs have grown, and there just isn't the infrastructure in place for that. So there are gaps, there are systemic gaps that I think need to be addressed. We have to recognize as well that Jordan's principle isn't just a legal obligation, it is a moral one. But this Liberal government, it has made a commitment to the spirit and intent of Jordan's principle. So when we think about the spirit, this refers to that underlying purpose of Jordan's principle. It ensures that our First Nation children are receiving their health, social, educational supports that they need without delay. So I guarantee that I will continue to fight for this. We need to make sure that every child doesn't get stuck in the jurisdiction between federal and provincial. And when we think about the intent of this goal was created in the memory of Jordan River Anderson, so we can't forget that story. This child who was from Norway House, and we just visited the community, and so this story was brought up over and over by the people that we visited. So 100% voting Liberal ensures that you have somebody at the table in Ottawa to advocate for Jordan's principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I just wanted to ask Nikki if you wanted the question repeated or not, or if you're okay with.
Sure.
Sure, okay. Although the House of Commons unanimously adopted Jordan's principle in 2007, the federal government has faced criticism from First Nations for its inadequate implementation. Delays, policy changes, and legal reinterpretations have hindered the timely provision of essential services to First Nations children. Will your party legislate an enforcement mechanism that holds federal departments accountable for implementing a child-first principle to eliminate delays, funding cuts, rejection letters, and will you ensure jurisdictional disputes never impact service delivery again?
Well, thank you very much. I want to start by saying, and I referred to it in my opening remarks, that the NDP has been the party that has championed Jordan's principle in support of Jordan's family, Norway House Cree Nation, and First Nations that have been part of this fight. But I think we also need to be clear that it's the Liberals that have cut Jordan's principle, right? So in the last budget, the Liberals tried cutting $7.6 billion from Indigenous services, and the biggest chunk was to Jordan's principle. And we in the NDP, as part of the agreement we had, we said we will not support this budget until you reverse those cuts. And in that case, they did. And they waited until the last part of, the last few months and certainly into this year, where they've gotten rid of the back to basics, where they're cutting off reserve programming, where they're cutting the tribal councils. It's the Liberals who are doing that. Okay? So I think we have to be very clear that the Liberals are not where they need to be on a program that is literally holding up some of the most vulnerable children, families, people, and communities across our region, on and off reserve. We in the NDP have fought from the beginning for Jordan's principle. I have been clear the importance of not just reversing the cuts, but expanding Jordan's principle, because we know that nobody else is in our communities across our region to do this work, this life-saving work. And it is going to be a fight. I also want to clarify that Mark Carney's platform is out. He's talking about $42 billion in cuts, and he's told Canadians it won't be in healthcare. Well, let's guess what other departments he might come after. I'm fairly certain, based on what we've seen, the little we've seen on reconciliation, that Indigenous services may be a target. We need to fight back. We need a strong voice to fight for our
Thank you,
region
Nikki.
on
Your
Jordan's
time is up.
principle and everything else.
So, Niki Ashton, this question will be to you. You can catch your breath first while I ask it. It's on healthcare. So we know across northern Manitoba, the First Nations face many barriers in accessing quality care, culturally safe health care. Communities are calling for control over their own healthcare systems to reflect traditional knowledge, holistic wellness, and community priorities. Will your party commit to transferring decision-making and funding authority for Northern Health Services directly to First Nations and replace the current patchwork system that exists? And this includes addressing current urgent gaps in mental health, addictions treatment, and emergency care. Will your party transfer this authority, and how do you intend to do it, if you will?
Thank you for that question. There is not one community in our region that doesn't have enough nurses, enough healthcare staff, in many cases, suitable equipment for basic even diagnostics, and in a number of cases as well, improper infrastructure. We in the NDP have been clear champions of healthcare since day one, and we have also been very clear that when we're talking about investments in First Nations, healthcare is at the center of the discussion. As I mentioned earlier, I was proud to support Cross Lake's work in getting a new health center, Norway House Cree Nation's work in the new hospital. I worked with Minister Jane Philpott at the time, and I've been clear that our region deserves better. I spoke out against the fact that too many nursing stations have to shut down and be open just on an emergency basis because there aren't enough ISC nurses staffing them. This is the federal government contractually obligated to have nurses in nursing stations and are not fulfilling their contract. This is under the Liberals. And unfortunately, we know that people have faced immense hardship and even lives have been lost. I know Manto Sipi has been outspoken on this. God's Lake Narrows has been outspoken on this. People in our communities have not had the health care they deserve. We need to see critical investments in healthcare, including in infrastructure, in terms of personnel, training, and recruitment. I'm incredibly admire the work of Northern nurses, but we need to see many more, including the support for Indigenous and Northern nurses to train and come back to our regions. But the reality is funding is at the core of this discussion. We in the NDP are the only party that champions critical investment in healthcare, including on First Nations.
Would you like that question repeated?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So across northern Manitoba, First Nations face many barriers to accessing quality, culturally safe health care. Communities are calling for control over their own health systems to reflect traditional knowledge, holistic wellness, and community priorities. Will your party commit to transferring decision-making and funding authority for Northern Health Services directly to First Nations? And this would include addressing urgent gaps in mental health, addictions treatment, access to qualified medical staff, and emergency care. If you intend to do this, how will your party transfer authority?
Right. So I think it's important to recognize that the items that have been acknowledged by Niki Ashton in terms of those developments in the north, those developments have actually come through the Liberal government, not the NDP. The NDP do not have access to federal funds because they are not in government. I think it's important to recognize that advocacy is important, but those decisions are made by parties that are in government. And the NDP will not form government, at least not this time around. When we're looking at healthcare in our communities, there have been huge investments into First Nations. We've seen the development of a hospital in Norway House, Cross Lake. We see some of these developments happening, but there's still ways to go. And we can't stop the progress that is happening in our communities, and we will stop that progress if we allow a conservative government to get in. That is why it is important to win every single seat for the Liberals across this country, because you don't want to have a minority government. You need a majority government to make sure that we could make decisions to keep pushing things forward. We do not want to slide back and end up in the Harper days. In that situation as well, the NDP are not useful to our communities. It's important to have allies, yes, but it's also important to recognize that under the banner of reconciliation, that as Indigenous people, we do not have privilege. We do not have opportunities or access to money, and so we have to make sure that we get behind our own people so that we could get our own seat at the table. And that's how we advocate, that's how we become the problem solvers of the issues that we're dealing with in our own communities. So in terms of healthcare, mental health, there's been huge advancements as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. Your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. This next question is on treaty rights and legal enforcement. Treaties are not historic artifacts, they are living agreements between sovereign nations. Yet Canada continues to fail in honoring treaty obligations, and First Nation face enormous legal and political barriers when seeking to enforce these rights. Leaders across Manitoba are calling for legislative and policy change to ensure treaty promises are upheld both in domestic and international legal forums. What federal legislative or policy changes will your party commit to that ensure that First Nations can enforce treaty obligations in Canada courts and international forums? Are you prepared to call upon your Prime Minister to issue a cabinet directive for the full implementation of pre-1975 treaties here in the Manitoba region?
Rebecca, you're up first.
All right, so when we think about the treaties, they are living agreements. And when we agreed to those treaties, it was about mutual benefit and mutual obligation. There have been so many broken treaty promises over the years. We know that we're still pushing for treaty land entitlement, and we need to keep pushing for that. So when we think about what the Liberal government has done today, there has been more investments into our communities than any other government prior. And this is under the banner of reconciliation and a nation-to-nation relationship. So when we think about what we're doing, we need to do more. So as an Indigenous woman, I think it's important to recognize that we need to have a seat at the table. That is the only answer. We have to continue to advocate for ourselves, and it doesn't make sense to have other people advocating for us. You know, as much as people say, well, you know, I'm not from the north, I'm not living here. Well, let's take a look at why that is. There isn't the types of opportunity that we need for employment, and that's why we see a lot of our young people leave the north. And so when we think about the type of investments we need into treaties, we have to recognize that they are fundamental obligations that will never change. And under a liberal government, we're going to continue to advocate. You better believe that I'm going to be at the table advocating as well, and we need to ensure that we fast-track the treaty land entitlement claims and expedite resolutions. We know that there was $210 million that was already put out as advance payments from the Liberal government, but this isn't enough. It does signal progress, but we need to keep advancing this further. So basically what I'm saying is if you get behind me, I'm going to work hard for you, because that's what I do as a First Nations woman. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Would you like the question repeated?
I think it's okay. Took some notes, yeah. Respecting treaty rights is core to establishing a nation-to-nation relationship. It is at the core of moving forward on reconciliation, and we in the NDP have always been allies in the fight for treaty rights to be respected. It was the NDP as well that led the fight in Parliament around the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and it is the NDP that has been outspoken in moving forward on treaty and Indigenous rights, including their implementation. But let me share with you a very troubling recent event. Liberal leader Mark Carney, before he announced the election, announced his new cabinet. And many of you in this room will know that in that new cabinet, he got rid of the standalone Department of Crown Indigenous Relations, the department that is tasked with moving forward in terms of the implementation of the treaties, of the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights, in terms of longstanding land claims, etc. And he took the Crown Indigenous Relations Department and he put it into Justice, the exact same department that has the lawyers that fight First Nations in court on the water case, on treaty land entitlement cases, on cases vis-a-vis First Nations. I find it hard to believe that Mark Carney understands the importance of the treaties, the importance of moving forward on implementation, when I see that the Crown Indigenous Relations Department was moved into Justice, the very same department that is tasked with fighting First Nations in court. That, to me, is a sign that we've got problems. That, to me, is a sign that Mark Carney, when it comes to reconciliation, is not part of the solution, but rather part of the problem. And that's why we need a strong voice to work with you, to work with First Nations, as part of a party that has a
Time
track
is up,
record of
Niki.
doing
Thank
this
you
work
very much.
and fighting for treaty rights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're moving on to water and housing. Today, 5 Manitoba First Nations are under water advisories: Tataskwayak, Shamattawa, Matthias Colombe, St. Teresa Point, and Little Grand Rapids. Overcrowded and crumbling homes have led to serious health risks on many First Nations, affecting elders and children. Despite years of promises, progress has been slow and uneven. What concrete projects and timelines will your party commit to in your first term to end this crisis? And this is to you, NDP candidate Niki Ashton.
It is shocking and unacceptable that in the year in 2025, in one of the richest countries in the world, that First Nations still do not have access to clean drinking water. It is also unacceptable that Canada is fighting First Nations in court who are fighting for access to clean drinking water. I am proud to have supported the leadership of Tataskwayak Cree Nation and Shamattawa as they lead a class action lawsuit in court, supported by AMC, over the failure to provide clean drinking water. What's particularly disturbing is that in court records, the Liberal lawyers argued that First Nations don't have the right to clean drinking water. They were hoping that this would stay in the records, but I was proud to be the one to raise that in Parliament. In the records, they also argued that Prime Minister Trudeau's commitments and others on the election trail didn't actually count. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that is not a party that's committed to reconciliation. That is not a party that's committed to human rights, the most basic right being that of access to clean drinking water. That, to me, is a party that is willing to spend money, big money, to direct its lawyers to fight First Nations for simply claiming the right to clean drinking water. I'm proud of the NDP's track record in fighting for access to clean drinking water. We pushed for investments as part of our agreement with the government over the last 3 years, but we know they're not enough. And they are not enough, especially for communities that have had long-standing boiled water advisories, like Shamattawa and TCN, recognizing that other communities as well lack water trucks, lack proper equipment,
Thank you, Niki. Your
lack
time
the
is
kind
up.
of infrastructure. We will fight for that.
Rebecca, would you like the question repeated? Would you like-
Boil water advisories?
Yes.
I think we're good.
5 First Nations, and we're asking what concrete projects and timelines will your party commit to in your first term to end the crisis?
Okay. So when the Liberals first got in 2015, there were over 100 communities that were under boil water advisories. I'm proud to say that the Liberal government has invested billions. And so when we take a look at some of the communities that have moved out of a boil water advisory, that includes God's Lake First Nations, lifted in 2019, Hollow Water First Nations, May 2018, Little Saskatchewan First Nations, March 2021, Pongassi First Nations, March 2018, Penumutang, April 2019, and that's just to name a few. There is still a long ways to go. We know the issues at hand here. Infrastructure, we need infrastructure. A lot of these communities are remote, isolated communities. So yes, we need to keep going. We need progress. And that's why you need somebody in government. The NDP will never have access to funds. It's the Liberal government that is making these investments. And we need to make sure that we do not slide back on the progress that has been made. So when we think about those investments, we need to make sure that we're working hand in hand with First Nations to make those investments. So those decisions come from communities. We know that there are still a number of communities that are in the queue, but this Liberal government is definitely committed to ensuring that we move every community out of boil water advisories. So I know that the NDP like to take credit for a lot of this, but it is not their decision to make. And it's important to recognize once again that you need somebody in government who's going to help move these decisions forward to make sure that we meet the needs of our community. So there's been huge investments in infrastructure, and when we think about housing as well, there's $6 billion that's going to go towards rapid affordable housing, and with that, they're
Time
going
is
to
up,
need
Rebecca. Thank you very
infrastructure
much.
for water and sewer to go along with that.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rebecca. This next question is on youth mental health and suicide prevention. First Nations youth in northern communities continue to face a suicide crisis rooted in intergenerational trauma, systemic underfunding, and a lack of culturally grounded mental health supports. What concrete commitments will your party make to fund and expand First Nations-led youth wellness, land-based healing, and crisis intervention programs? Will you support the creation of a national suicide prevention strategy designed and governed by First Nations? For Rebecca.
Yes, so there's been 1.2 million that has already been set aside for investments into this. And again, these solutions have to come from our communities. It's actually a project that we're working on now. So we have a number of our team members that are out helping to develop a suicide strategy. And so when we think about suicide strategy, we're also talking about life promotion. It needs to be a holistic approach that comes from our community, you know, so that we don't have people parachuting in, coming with the solutions. Those solutions need to come from our youth. And so when we think about the kinds of things that youth are asking for, they're asking for opportunity, they're asking for connectivity to the rest of the world. The federal Liberals are looking to invest $2 billion over 10 years to a youth employment strategy. Those are some of the things that our youth are asking for, is an opportunity for a future. There's also $240 million over 3 years to increase access to additional opportunities, training. We're also seeing women's shelters. We're paying for women's shelters within our communities to ensure not only the youth, but the mothers and the single mothers in the communities also have access to supports and resources. And these are the types of investments that the Liberal government is committing to, and they're the type of investments that I see as an Indigenous woman that we need in our communities. That's why I have Logan Morasti on my team here. Logan is our youth ambassador for our team. He is a nationally trained youth suicide prevention coordinator. He's fantastic, and he's spreading a message of hope that we need to be part of the solutions. We need to work together. We need to get behind our youth and ensure that we're empowering them to find the solutions. And that's what I'm going to continue fighting for. So thank you, Logan, for being on our team. Thank you for being such a
Thank you, Rebecca.
sound
Your time
voice
is up.
for all of the youth in the riding. Miigwech.
Would you like the question repeated, Nikki?
First Nations communities across our region, and young people in particular in our communities, are facing a drug crisis, a hopelessness crisis. We need to restore hope, but the way to restore that hope is by having a federal government that actually is willing to allocate resources and support programming in our communities. Just a few days ago, I had the chance to visit Baskibanoon in God's Lake Narrows, a groundbreaking program to help people with addictions. The federal government responded to the call, and I was proud to also support that call, but has left the program hanging without ongoing permanent funding. We need the federal government to invest in treatment and addiction supports. We need the federal government to open more treatment centers across our region. And we need to invest in youth programming, including land-based cultural programming that's already taking place, but that requires more funding. And we also need to invest in recreation. We know that recreation in regions like ours saves lives. In Barons River, the arena burnt down, and the federal government still hasn't done anything. We need to make sure that our youth, young people on First Nations, in communities, including like Thompson, have good, healthy spaces to come together, to be able to build their sense of self, to be able to restore hope, to connect them with elders, with their families, with their communities. But the reality is that requires funding. I've been proud as the Member of Parliament to fight for more investment in youth, in treatment and addictions, in support for our communities that are facing crisis after crisis right now. I'm concerned about the potential of cuts
Time
that have
is
been
up.
announced by
Thank you
Mark
very
Carney,
much. Thank you
and
very
we'll need to
much.
fight back.
Before we move to questions around the table here, I want to address one that has come from online. And this is from Danielle. The current priority of the governments is, or the parties right now, is economic well-being, resource development investments in northern Manitoba. How does your party plan to honor Indigenous sovereignty and make progress happen to improve the gaps in northern communities? And Rebecca, this is to you first. Oh, sorry, Niki, this is to you first. I apologize. So how will your party honor Indigenous sovereignty as we look to resource development in the north and improve the gaps for communities?
As I shared earlier at the beginning of this discussion, the NDP has a track record provincially as well as federally of working in partnership with First Nations on economic development. That's evident throughout our region, throughout our province. And we know that nothing gets done without working together. First Nations have made that clear, and we've seen that through our history. But the reality is that right now we are facing a troubling time, where under the specter of Donald Trump, we have both the Liberal and Conservative national leaders talking about fast-tracking resource development. And I think we all know that when we hear that, it means running roughshod over Indigenous rights, ignoring the environmental aspects of projects, and with the possibility of worsening the environmental impacts of resource development. We need a strong voice that's going to fight back against that plan that we're seeing to fast-track resource development. We are not going to stand up to Donald Trump and build a stronger Canada by violating Indigenous rights. We are not going to stand up and build a stronger Canada by destroying our environment. We are only going to build a stronger Northern Manitoba and Canada by working in partnership with First Nations, ensuring that any and all development that is pursued is done in partnership with First Nations leading the way, including through ownership. I've been clear supporter of the work happening by ACG on the rail line. I've been a clear supporter of the work that many First Nations have engaged with in terms of economic development. We in the NDP believe that First Nations should be
Thank
guiding
you,
the
Niki.
way
Your time is up.
in terms of resource development in their territories. Thank you.
Rebecca, would you like that question repeated?
Sure. Thank you.
The parties, federal parties' current priorities are economic well-being and investments in northern Manitoba. How does your party plan to honor Indigenous sovereignty, to make progress happen, but also improve the gaps in communities in the north?
Okay. So first of all, I want to say that it really is important to see the opportunity at hand. As you know, with the tariff wars, we have to reimagine what our economy is going to look like across this country. And so Mark Carney has made it clear that he won't repeal C-69 because we need a framework that's going to balance economic growth with Indigenous and environmental responsibility. So instead, we're not looking at streamlining processes just for the sake of development, but through a one project, one review approach with timelines and coordination that are working hand in hand with Indigenous peoples, we're going to see the type of growth that we need in our communities. We also have to recognize our inherent and treaty rights. We need to ensure that we're protecting our laws and our cultures, our lands and our resources. And so that's the kind of work that we're going to do together, hand in hand with First Nations. I also want to point out that Mark Carney has also doubled the guaranteed loan program from $5 billion to $10 billion for Indigenous communities to ensure that we're partners hand in hand in development. And we know that our people have great ideas in the North. There's these groundswells of things that are happening in our communities, and this is an opportunity to get behind that. So again, you need somebody that's in government that's going to help move our economic development plans forward in our communities. You know, I just came from the Island Lakes area, and they have great plans to develop their own airport. They also want to see their own hospital. And so they're not waiting. They're looking at that as economic opportunity, although it falls under health. So this is the type of opportunity where our communities could start accessing those guaranteed loan programs to move initiatives forward.
Oh, time is up, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're going to give about a few minutes here to anyone around this table if you have a specific question you'd like to ask the candidates. Chief Lavaseur would, that's microphone, oh, I don't think it extends that far. We have a microphone coming to you.
Test. Okay. I have several questions. Here's one. The Federal Pay Equity Act guarantees equal pay for work of equal value, but First Nations governments were excluded from this legislation. As a result, many Indigenous women working in our schools, government offices, and health centers are still denied basic wage protections. Will you commit to ending this discriminatory exemption and ensure that First Nations employees are fully included under Canada's pay equity laws?
Going in the system here, Rebecca, that question would be to you first.
I'd have to say absolutely. When we think about institutional racism and the progress that we've made over the last number of generations, we need to keep pushing forward. So I've actually worked with the provincial government on addressing institutional racism in this province. So my company was hired to develop a K-12 anti-racism policy. And so with that, we had to work with the education system and define what systemic racism is, institutional racism, interpersonal, and the internalized. And so when we think about the progress that has been made, yes, people of color and Indigenous people have been left out. And that's why you need to ensure that someone like me is able to get to the table and talk about the changes that are needed. So the limitations that I see in the work that we've done under the banner of anti-racism is when you look at the hierarchies in our institutions and our organizations, we often see white men at the helm of these organizations. And we've replaced that with white women. And we call that progress. So we have to start seeing that as Indigenous peoples, Not only do we have to ensure that we have equal pay, but we have to continue to break through that glass ceiling to ensure we're at the tables where these decisions are being made. And the only way that we could do that is by getting our own people in there, making sure that we have a voice for people, that we're talking for women, we're also talking for people of color. And so when we think about the opportunities, we do not come from privilege. And so I know using the word white might be offensive to some people, but it is a reality that if you are white and you are white passing, there are more opportunities for you in the system, and we have to change that. And that includes ensuring that we have equal rights and equal pay. As an Indigenous entrepreneur, I struggle with that myself. I'm always lowballed on the first, and then I have to fight for equal
Thank
pay.
you, Rebecca.
So I understand the issue well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Chief Levasseur, and acknowledge your leadership as a strong female leader in our north. I appreciate you raising this issue. First of all, on the gender front, absolutely, I would be committed in terms of fighting this, in terms of the Pay Equity Act. The NDP has had a long history of fighting for pay equity. But I think this is also part of the broader issue around the underfunding of First Nations capital and programming, whereby First Nations women, but First Nations people working on reserve tend to make less money than they should, and certainly than their counterparts do off reserve. In fact, as I was leaving the health center in South Indian Lake just a few days ago, somebody came up to me and he said, "What's the minimum wage these days?" Because I'm just above it. And this person works very hard to get people the health care that they need at the health center. They were elderly. They talked about how difficult it was and how they considered themselves fortunate to have that job, but yet very much underpaid. And to me, when we know that there's that fiduciary responsibility from Canada, the underfunding that leads to not just third world living conditions, but also subpar salaries, incomes, wages for people working on reserve is a reflection of Canada's ongoing racism and of course, lack of living up to reconciliation. But I want to bring it back as well for a moment to the Liberal Party and their sort of approach on these issues. To me, the Liberal Party, certainly in the last 10 years, hasn't shown much time for strong women. I had the opportunity to
Time
work
is
with
up, Niki. Thank you very
two
much.
of them. I'll get back to this in the next question.
Maybe. We are still open on this table for leadership, chiefs, grand chiefs, to ask any questions if anyone has anything else they'd like to ask. Chief Andrews? Oh, mic number 7, please. Oh, there's one there. There you go.
Hi, Chief Gilbert Andrews, God's Lake First Nation. My question is about the cost of living in remote and isolated communities. I've been voicing this for a long time. Nothing's happened. Nothing's changed for the better for our people. They're in a state of hopelessness because politicians don't do anything for us. It seems like the rich is helping the rich. I meant the rich being Northwest Company. They're still ripping us off. The Nutrition North program is not helping us. It's helping them. So something has to be done to revamp the Nutrition North program together with First Nations at the table. And my people were asking, why can't we get the same treatment as these immigrants? They're getting a lot of help from government. Give some help, some of that help to our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Andrews. And when we were in God's Lake Narrows, we did go to the Northern store, and people said, you have to see the prices. The reality is that the Northwest Company has been making major profits off of northern and remote First Nations for far too long. And we know that part of the problems with Nutrition North date back to the Harper Conservatives who reformed the program and gave more support to Northwest Company. Unfortunately, the Liberals didn't change the formula. I'm heartened by the fact that people in Nunavut are now taking the Northwest Company to court over Nutrition North, and they are claiming that Nutrition North is being used to support their profits. I think this could be a case that could have make a real difference for communities here in our region, and I certainly hope so. We in the NDP have been clear that corporate greed, including in the grocery sector, is out of control, and nowhere is that more evident than with the Northwest Company in communities across our region. I'm proud to have worked with my colleague from Nunavut to fight back against the Liberal failures when it comes to Nutrition North, and calling for more support for food security initiatives in our region, more competition to be allowed, and also for support for the food harvesting initiatives, including, I know MKO has done important work on this front. Food security insecurity is at an all-time high in our region, and that is not acceptable, and it shouldn't be the case in a country as wealthy as Canada. The federal government has a critical role to play, and sitting by and doing favors for the Northwest Company and other grocery chains is not finding solutions for First Nations, for people who are struggling. We in the NDP have been clear. We are here to stand up to corporate greed. We are clear that we need
Thank
to
you,
reform
Niki. Your
Nutrition
time is
North,
up.
and we need food security in our region.
Thank you. Rebecca, would you care to answer?
What was the question again, please?
We'll ask Chief Andrews to reiterate.
The cost of living is really high in our remote and isolated communities. And the Nutrition North program was supposed to help our communities, but it's not helping our people, it's helping Northwest Company. And the people also requested, why can't we get the same kind of help the immigrants are getting once they arrive in Canada?
Okay, thank you. Yes. So, yeah, the cost of living is outrageous in our communities, and it's unacceptable. I've actually been taking note of that in every community that I go to. So when we think about Nutrition North, there were huge investments, but the government obviously didn't get that right because, as you said, we're still looking at the right type of formula. And that's why you need our own people at the table to help define what that looks like. Because the reality of it is we have people who are non-Indigenous, non-First Nations at the table making these decisions who do not have the lived experience within our communities. So they come up with great ideas and with good intentions, but it doesn't get down to the people in the way that we need it to. And that is why we need our own people. We need First Nations, we need Métis, we need Inuit people in government at all levels, at the federal level, at the provincial level, at the local level, and in our communities. And that is the only way that we're going to get it right. And so when we think about the cost, the infrastructure is needed. So when we start to look at envisioning what this economy could look like within the Churchill Keewatinook Aski riding, with the ports, updating the rail line, looking at an Indigenous-led or partnered mineral strategy. This will help bring the infrastructure that we need to our communities. And when we build that infrastructure, the cost of food will go down because we will have access to roads. But that is only if you vote in a government that will work hand in hand with First Nations to make sure that we have these developments in place. We don't want other people representing us anymore. We're capable people. We have to believe in ourselves. And this government is committed to working hand in hand with First Nations. We've seen that through the developments that have come into our community, but we've had an NDP government, a representative here for 17 years, who does not
Thank
have that
you.
lived experience
Your time
as
is
the
up.
rest of us as Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. So we are a little bit over time, but we want to give the candidates each a couple of minutes to close out with their own remarks. And we will go in the same order as we did to begin. No, 2 minutes to close.
Rebecca, you could start.
Oh, you still have another question? One more? Okay. Can the candidates stay? We were only supposed to be here till 6:30, but as long as the candidates can stay, yes.
Yes, we have several questions. I didn't come here just to listen to people spew, respectfully.
Hi, my name is Sophie Lockhart. I'm a counselor for Fox Lake Cree Nation. I just had one question. It's on health. I don't know how many of you know, but Gillam Hospital was closed. We don't have no long-term care, and they transferred the patients to Flin Flon without informing the families. And we really need the beds back. And in November, month of November, one of our Fox Lake elders passed, and the family wasn't notified. So we really need that hospital because, you know, we have to make trips into Thompson, and because the hospital is closed. So, thank you.
Rebecca.
Yeah, I've been traveling around to Lynn Lake, Leaf Rapids, all of the different communities, and really seeing the need for hospitals in our community, the infrastructure crumbling. Even though we are getting builds in our community, there's still a need for operational budgets. So again, I think it's really important, like the only way we're going to make that happen is if we're more visible and that we have a seat at the table. Like we have, you know, it's great that we have people who are wanting to speak up on our behalf, but it's time for our own people to speak up. We have the solutions, and if we're not there at the table, then, you know, then we're not moving forward as a nation. We need to get behind our own people because we know what we need in our communities. So that includes taking a look at the operations of ISK and how decisions are made. There's so much bureaucracy there that things get lost sometimes in translation, but at the end of the day, we're fighting for lives. There is such an urgency in our community to make sure that we get the supports that we need. And you're more likely to get that type of support if you have somebody who's in government and who actually has access to resources. The NDP have been a great critic. So they're, you know, the job of opposition is to get out there, to yell and scream and to say, hey, you know, we're fighting. But that's their job in government. But they have not been able to contribute any dollars to your communities over the past 17 years because they have not been in government. So I thank Niki Ashton for her advocacy, but it's time that we represent ourselves. At the end of the day, we need to see what happens when you actually have somebody in this riding that is in government, that has access to resources, and that is making decisions for your communities. And as much as the NDP want to take credit for the monies that have been flowing into your communities, the hospitals, the schools that are being built, that's Liberal decisions and money that's been flowing into our community.
Thank you very much for that question. So the Gillam Hospital, of course, is part of the provincial system, and under the PCs, we saw deep cuts to healthcare that affected healthcare in Gillam, in Lynn Lake, in Leaf Rapids, here in Thompson, and across our region. I am proud that the NDP government has already started making some investments, but it's clear that we need more support. When the Gillam Hospital did shut down, I called on the federal government to send military personnel, health personnel, doctors, nurses, to come and staff the hospital in Gillam. And unfortunately, the federal government didn't seem that it had a role to play and ignored the fact that Gillam is a community that services many First Nations people, both that live in Gillam, but also coming in from Fox Lake. And similarly, as do other health centers in our region that are under provincial jurisdiction. The reality is that healthcare needs more investment in our region, on reserve and off reserve. And we know that as the hospital here in Thompson gets overloaded, it means that people aren't getting the care that they need in a timely fashion. We need to see the federal government invest in healthcare in First Nations, invest in healthcare nationally. We saw deep cuts under Stephen Harper, and we haven't seen the restoration of funding for the Liberals to meet the needs, not just of communities, of our region as a whole. I commit to being a strong voice in fighting for healthcare in our region. And let me be clear, I do not apologize for fighting for Northern Manitoba. That is, I believe, the key to pushing for what we need. That is the key to being heard, because Liberals and Conservatives have a history of not listening to First Nations, of
Thank
not
you,
listening to
Niki.
Northern communities, and we have to fight
Thank you.
hard and speak loud
Your time
to
is
get our voices heard. Thank you.
If the candidates can stay, Chief Lavaseur has suggested maybe till about 7:20, am I correct, Chief? To answer, there's a lot of questions here that are important, as she has rightly stated, and we'd like to continue if you are both willing. Okay. Does leadership have more questions?
Yes, I have about 12 questions, but I would like to ask at least 2 more. And I thank the candidates for making the commitment to stay behind and listen, because that is the real telltale sign for us as First Nations leadership. Who will listen and who will hear us? Okay, many First Nations in this region have been waiting decades, including my nation, for the federal and provincial governments to honor treaty land entitlement agreements. Some of us are still waiting for land selections to be approved and for compensation payments to be made, despite these being legally binding obligations. What will you do to break the bureaucratic deadlock, ensure full transfer of our TLE lands, and deliver the compensation we've been owed for generations?
Thank you for that question, Chief Lavaseur. First of all, I want to be clear, there is a long road ahead when it comes to honoring treaty land entitlement in our region in particular, and of course across the country. I acknowledge that NCN, Lac Brochet, other nations across our region recently had a win after decades of fighting in terms of recognition and an initial agreement, although we know much more needs to be done to fulfill it. I'm proud to have stood with leaders from our region in protest in front of Prime Minister Trudeau's offices some years ago, along with Grand Chiefs and chiefs from our area, calling for the particular treaty land entitlement issues to be resolved. And it's taken a long time. What concerns me is that when we have a Liberal leader who gets rid of the Crown Indigenous Relations portfolio and puts it into justice, that important issues like this, like moving forward on treaty land entitlement, will not have the priority that they require. You can't have Crown Indigenous relations that was set apart because of Canada's need to focus on reconciliation and particularly long-standing claims be shoved into justice, the department that fights First Nations in court. I also want to acknowledge that there's nations like OPCN that still have only a small parcel of land, still waiting decades for reserve land to be transferred. That is unconscionable. I commit to keeping up the fight alongside your nation, First Nations across our region, on treaty land entitlement and more broadly on long-standing issues that are at the core of building that sovereignty, that nation-to-nation
Thank you,
relationship that is required. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a big one for our communities because it represents opportunity. And we've seen what this is doing in some of our communities, Winnipeg and some of the other urban areas, like here in Thompson with the Passego project. So we need to keep moving these advancements forward. So my understanding is the federal Liberals have advanced $210 million to accelerate the resolution of treaty land entitlement. So that is a start. It's demonstrating a commitment. And again, it is only a Liberal government that can make these types of commitments because they have access to resources and funds. But we need to make sure that we keep upholding the spirit and the intent of treaties. We need to make sure that we're recognizing treaty land entitlement as constitutional treaty rights. And so there's still a lot of work ahead, and I'll keep the pressure on if voted in to make sure that we move these agreements forward. There are so many amazing opportunities out there in our communities right now with people wanting to move these initiatives forward, but it requires working with 3 levels of government. And the time is right now because we do have an NDP government with an Indigenous person at the helm who understands the importance of this, but we also have a federal Liberal government that has already demonstrated the type of commitment that we need to see to First Nations. So we need to think strategically about who we vote for in this upcoming election, who's actually going to be in government, who has the opportunity, and who can help advance treaty land entitlement and all of the other things that we're looking to advance in our communities. So that's why I'm saying it's really important to vote Liberal, to make sure that your vote counts. We know that the NDP will not form government. We know that we've seen 17 years of the NDP in this riding, and it's time for change. It's time for new leadership so that you can have somebody advocating and moving this type of agenda forward.
Hello, my name is Michael Renchuk, Councillor of Fox Lake Cree Nation. I have a question on public safety and the funding dollars allocated to the First Nations Safety Officer Program. Right now, the program is the funding dollars compared to the RCMP, we're at maybe 30% of where we can pay our officers compared to what the RCMP pays their officers. What's the candidates' positions on how to correct that, and what is their ideas on Manitoba First Nation policing? Thank you.
Or Rebecca.
So there has been a commitment to over $540 million to this program. We know that our communities have had to take it upon themselves to establish the First Nations Safety Officer Program, and that is the type of initiative I'm talking about when I say that there are amazing groundswells that are happening in our communities. So with the First Nations and Inuit policing program, we need to change that from a program to an essential service. So we need to make sure that the federal government is actually investing the dollars so that we can create our own police force. We're capable people. We have people on the ground, in the trenches, in our communities who are actually doing that work already. And in fact, I worked with MKO last year on their safety, wellness, and justice initiative. We invited all 26 First Nations communities together to talk about safety, wellness, and justice, as well as about prevention, intervention, and reintegration. And so we had 288 recommendations from that. And these are the solutions that are coming from our communities, and these are the solutions that I want to support and advocate. So in 2020, Public Safety Canada provided $150 million under the FNIP to support 1,350 police officer positions in 425 First Nations communities. So that's just a start. There's also new funding, $540 million over 5 years for the program. And so that's not it. I think we know what we need in our communities, and this should be an essential service and something that I will continue to fight for. There's already been some commitments, but we need to make sure that our people are leading it. And the only way we can do that is to ensure that we have somebody who is from your communities at the table advocating for those changes.
Thank you for that question, Councillor. I want to begin by acknowledging the heroic work of First Nations safety officers in communities across our region. I can't tell you how concerning it is to be in community after community and to hear about hear from First Nations safety officers what they often have to deal with, without proper pay, without proper equipment, without the proper backup. We know that First Nations safety officers are the front line of defense in what is a growing drug crisis in our communities and in our region. And they are the key to be able to find solutions, especially in situations where people are in harm's way. But the way to support that work is to fund them. And the Liberals have been well aware of the critical work of FNSOs. The Liberals are also well aware of the critical work of check stops in communities, and yet they've continued to underfund FNSOs and insist that bands pay for check stops out of their own funding in most cases. This is not acceptable. Communities are waging a war against factors well out of their control. I see it here in Thompson, our own community. All of our communities are connected when it comes to this crisis. But let's not kid ourselves. To support FNSOs, it means requiring equitable funding, ensuring that they have the supports needed, and ensuring that we are moving forward in terms of solutions on policing that works for communities, including a police service, Indigenous police service. We know that the RCMP has not been able to live up to the needs of our region in many cases. We are aware of the understaffing. We're aware of the challenges that they face. But the reality is that First Nations communities across our region are in crisis. A public safety.
Thank you. I appreciate the accolades and the praise being given to First Nations safety officers, Niki. Carol Kobliski is our Chief of Law Enforcement in NCN. She risks her life every day, along with her staff, to keep our community safe and to keep drugs out of the community. So I appreciate that. My question is this. Our Two-Spirit relatives continue to face high rates of violence, homelessness, discrimination, and exclusion, even within our own systems. What concrete action will you take to ensure that our Two-Spirit relatives in northern Manitoba are protected, respected, and included in federal policies, funding, and services, especially as this pertains to healthcare, housing, education, and justice?
For the question, and that's to you, Niki.
Thank you very much, Chief Levasseur, and I acknowledge the work happening in NCN, I know York Factory, many First Nations across our region to make clear the importance of not just inclusion, but recognition of two-spirited members of your communities. I also want to acknowledge MKO's work on this front, which is also very much connected to the work around violence, around missing and murdered Indigenous women and two-spirited people. The reality is, in order to find solutions, we have to acknowledge that, as you pointed out, Chief, two-spirited people face disproportionate levels of violence and disproportionate levels of injustice in accessing healthcare and the justice system. We need to make sure that any and all strategies when it comes to health and justice have an explicit recognition and meet the needs of two-spirited member First Nations people. This also requires funding. Now, we in the NDP have been clear that much more needs to be done, including when it comes to violence. And I'm proud to have worked with my colleague, MP Leah Gazan, in supporting her work around the Red Dress Alert, recognizing that much more needs to be done in terms of people who are so vulnerable, Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. But again, we need to see funding. We need to see funding to address the fact that many two-spirited people often have lack of access to education and training, lack of access to housing, and are often falling through the cracks and facing higher levels of poverty. We need to make sure that the federal government is part of the solution in lifting two-spirited people up, including in terms of economic stability and obviously when it comes to health and justice. There's so much work to be done on this front. And frankly, I'm concerned by the fact that we're seeing increased bigotry in our society and the need to stand up clearly, and I think First Nations have done that.
Thank you.
That two-spirited people matter,
Niki.
and we need to go forward in that work every day.
Thank you very
Thank you.
So I want to say that the Liberal government is committed to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which includes gender and diversity. We've seen huge developments within this Liberal government looking at issues that not only women face as a result of gender, but our two-spirited community. So when we look at some of the actions that have been taken, the Liberal government invested $1.3 million in a pilot project right here in Manitoba, and this was to support the development of resources and backing. But ultimately, the funding was in the hands of our Indigenous women organizations to lead the way, because that was the best way to move this forward. So in moving forward, we definitely need more funds. We need to make sure that we're also looking at the intersectional issues that our 2S LGBT plus communities face. So, and that's tied into that's tied into looking at things from an anti-racism framework. Like, we have to recognize that the targeting and the lack of supports often happen for people of color. That includes Indigenous, Black, and people of color. It also includes you know, the gender diversity that we're seeing, and we need to keep moving that momentum forward. We need to make sure that our people are safe and that everybody could show up in every situation without discrimination and without being targeted. So this one, I think, is very near and dear to our work around missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so we have to keep moving that fight forward. We have to keep putting investments into that and ensuring that our people are safe. That includes women, that includes the 2S LGBT community, and this is something that I will continue to fight for, because we have too many missing women, too many missing men, and we still have an institutional problem with
Thank
the
you,
racism
Rebecca.
that we see across this country.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at the table? Chief Lavasser.
Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said I have 12 questions. But one of my citizens has a question. Do any of the chiefs or grand chiefs or councillors have a problem with me allowing one of my NCN citizens to ask a question? Is that permissible?
Chief Yellowback does have a question actually as well, but.
He can go first.
Okay.
Chief Michael Yellowback from Manitoba Cree Nation. Thank you, Chief Lavasor. And anyway, I've been listening here to kind of this forum, and thank you to Niki, Ashton, and Rebecca Chartrand for being here this evening. And one of the things for our communities that has been hittest hard for us is that the housing crisis in our communities, and I know that with the disproportionate of funding that we get from community, from the federal government, whether whether it was the conservative government or the liberal government that have formed government since 1867. And you know that it's continuing to plague our First Nation communities, and their policies that they've made towards indigenous people are not conducive to our lives, because we are being affected what they pass in Ottawa. And you know that for our housing, that we have about 1,200 people in our community with only 160 houses. What does that tell you? 1,200 people for 160. We only have 160. We have 24 people living in a 4-bedroom house. And that's, I don't know how many times we've heard that, so we've echoed that with the Liberal government. It has fallen on deaf ears, including the Conservative government. We had a brand new school that was made a commitment back in 2006. It was the Liberal government who pulled the plug on that school, on our brand new school. And when we had a colonial accord, the NDP sided with the Conservatives to bring down the Liberal government. That could have had many benefits to our community when the colonial accord was being discussed, and former Prime Minister Martin had that commitment to work with Indigenous people across Canada. That could have brought in many benefits for our people. I'm not trying to defend anybody here or vote anybody here, but I'm still undecided for my people. But I need a commitment, whoever forms government, that they start looking at Indigenous issues, especially housing. Because for far too long, we have been the poorest of the poor, which we should not be. It's the Indian Act that's tying us down, including the Natural Transfer Resource Act that was enacted in 1930. We have millions, billions of resources available to us in our ancestral lands, but we cannot capitalize on them. If we had access to those resources, we wouldn't be dependent on government funding. We have Australians, the Chinese, people from Germany calling us as well, trying to we have close to $1 billion worth of lithium in our own backyard, but we cannot access it because our hands are tied. Because we need a government to start working for Indigenous people with us, not against us. Whether it's the NTP, the Liberal, or the Conservatives. I need your commitment to start improving the lives of Indigenous people.
Rebecca?
100% agree with you. And I know that there's been some recent commitments from the Carney government. So in the budget 2024 announced an additional investment of $918 million to accelerate the work in narrowing housing and infrastructure gaps in First Nations and Inuit and Métis communities. But that's not enough. That is not enough. That's a drop in the bucket. There's also been a commitment of $4.3 billion to advance urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing. So that money is still in the queue. The issue is that if the Liberals don't get in, then we know that that's out the door, right? The Conservatives will not follow through with that. And I know that I know that this is a great opportunity for the North because we were working with KTC to look at accessing those funds to create an Indigenous housing center right here in Thompson, Manitoba that would help address this housing crisis for our people across the country. And what better place to put it than right here in a northern community that is the hub of the northern Manitoba, but is also central to Canada. So fingers crossed, but it's still in the queue, and there's huge hopes there in terms of seeing more money coming into our community. And so these are the types of things that I would continue to fight for. There was also, the federal government has committed $1.6 billion in funding through that national housing strategy, which is exclusive for Indigenous and Northern housing. So these commitments, we want to make sure that the federal Liberal government makes good on them, and we want to make sure that those funds come right here into the Churchill Keewatinook Aski riding. But they're not going to get here if you don't, they're less likely to get here if you have an NDP government, somebody that's not at the decision-making table. You need somebody who's in a party that's going to help move these decisions forward. There's also a commitment to accelerating Canada Homes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Time is up. Thank you.
10 billion.
Thank you, Chief Yellowback. The number one issue when we visit house to house in communities is housing. Number one. And it's the stories like you shared of 24 people living in a home. It's the stories of people living in homes that were built within the last 5 years that already have mold in them. It's the story of people living in homes that are not fitting of a country as wealthy as Canada. Third world living conditions, most visible when it comes to the housing crisis. It's pushed First Nations, including St. Teresa Point and others, Cross Lake and others, to join part of a class action lawsuit to take on the federal government because of the housing crisis. The fact that it had to end here is unacceptable. First Nations shouldn't have to go to court for the right to safe housing, the right to live in a home. But this is also very much not by accident. It is by design. Liberals in the 90s cut funding to housing. And today we know that there's a $349.2 billion infrastructure gap for First Nations that includes housing. Liberals promised to close it by 2030. We're nowhere near that point. The Liberals have invested less than 1% of what's needed to end the Indigenous housing crisis. At the current rate, it will take between 58 and 141 years to satisfy the current need. This is unacceptable. I appreciate Ms. Chartrand referring to the commitments in the 2024 budget. Those were commitments that the NDP pushed for as part of our agreement with the government. Full stop. Those are priorities that we pushed for from day one since the beginning of that agreement. And when I hear that Mark
Niki.
Carney is talking about cuts,
Thank you.
I'm concerned that it also means cuts in terms of housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chief Officer.
Hello, my name is Felicia Lobster. I originate from Nisituasik. I am a fourth generation from the Lobster family. I have very concerning questions for both of the candidates. I also live in Thompson here, and I go to my community often in Nisituasik. I'm noticing rising youth violence and youth supports. Youth violence is increasing in northern communities. What federal resources will you fight for to address the root causes such as trauma, poverty, overcrowding, lack of opportunities? Will you advocate for funding to build and staff 24/7 youth centers, safe hangouts, and land-based healing camps for at-risk youth? And I also have one more question aside from that. Indigenous men need healing and support to take care of their families, to take care of their children, to take care of our community. Our men are suffering. What funding or federal partnerships will you push for to support by men, for men, Indigenous programs focused on fatherhood, healing, emotional regulation, and breaking the cycles of violence. How will you ensure men's programming will not be left behind in the conversations about healing and prevention? Our men matter too.
Thank you for your question, Felicia, and I want to acknowledge the work that you do in community to give more opportunities to young people, to children and youth. And the reality is that many young people here in our home community of Thompson are struggling right now. Many are struggling because they don't have a safe place to go to after school. They don't have a place where they can come together and find ways to support one another, find ways to restore hope. We need to see the federal government fund youth programs on an ongoing basis, not to ask First Nations and communities to pull away from the core funding that they have or peel away from programs that are supposed to be doing many other things, to find dedicated funding for First Nations youth, to find dedicated funding for youth that are falling through the cracks. I have been clear that there needs to be federal funding for youth programs, including around cultural work, around land-based work, and recreation. We have too many communities that don't have a functioning arena, too many communities without a youth center. And First Nations have made things work. They've created spaces, opportunities, celebrations, and events for young people. But the ongoing funding isn't there from the federal government, and we've seen the result. To your question around programming for Indigenous men, I appreciate what you're sharing, and again, the need for federal funding on that front, recognizing that many men are struggling. I realize as well that some of this is institutional funding around the need for treatment centers, the need for healing centers, the need for community-based programming. Unfortunately, the Liberals have all too often tried to push these discussions off to the side. And while they claim to focus on other areas, the reality is when we don't fund youth programs, we are letting young people down. They deserve much more. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Our youth are our future. We absolutely have to get behind our youth, and we have to, as an Indigenous person, we know we're still dealing with that intergenerational trauma within our communities, and we have to be, again, the problem solvers of that. We have to restore our culture, our language, our land-based learning, help our youth remember who they are by connecting not only to the land, but to each other. And so we know that the drugs that are coming into our community are one of those issues. I do want to point out that the Liberal government since 2015 has invested $2 billion supporting Indigenous people with mental health initiatives across this country. So that was 10 years ago. Last year in 2024, the Liberals have committed another $630 million, very specific to Indigenous mental health. But we have to have all levels of government working together, and that is definitely something that I will continue to push for. And we have to build the ecosystems in our community so that we can pool these resources together, so it's not just education, but we're doing education in a way that is also healing, that is also trauma-informed, so that we're not just studying like a Western European curriculum. If we bring our own languages to the schools, if we bring our own ways of learning, that will also help. So I think we need to think strategically about how we use our funds. So we have to center ourselves in the work we're doing, you know, creating the ecosystem between education, between employment, between funds that are coming into our communities for mental health services or services that are for our women and our men. And I agree, our men are often left out of the equation, and this is something that I've personally been advocating for. I have been supporting men's programs in the communities that I deal with, and it's something that is sorely missing. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks, Rebecca. This brings us to 7:16, would you, one more question, this will be our last question from leadership.
Unless someone else has a question, I don't want to suck up all the air. Okay. So this question, my final question, maybe I'll post my other ones on my Facebook, we'll see, is on economic reconciliation and resource development. How will you ensure First Nations have true ownership and equity in resource projects on our lands? And we're on NCN land, by the way, make no mistake of that. Not just consultation or impact benefit agreements, but actual shares, control, and long-term revenue.
Rebecca?
So I think it starts by looking at our sovereignty as Indigenous peoples under the Canadian Constitution, whether we're looking at that through UNDRIP, through a treaty lens. We have to recognize that UNDRIP is there because it's respecting that nation-to-nation relationship. It's not just about our communities, it's about ensuring that we protect our lands and our resources, and that we utilize our laws and our governments to engage with these systems. And so there has been some work by the federal Liberal government that put a 5-year action plan together to honor and implement UNDRIP to ensure that it aligns with Canadian law. So this has been in collaboration with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people across the country. There's still more work to be done in terms of rolling out that plan. And that is why it's even all that much more important to ensure that you have somebody who's Indigenous at the table to keep pushing for and ensuring that we're honoring our treaties, that we're not moving away from it, but that we're centering that as part of our conversations. Our treaties, our Aboriginal and inherent rights, the articles of UNDRIP, which are about protecting those inherent rights. So self-determination is important. We're constantly pushing it. We need to ensure that we're implementing free, prior, and informed consent before the governments make any decisions about what happens on our lands and things that will impact our lives. And that is something that I'm committed to supporting. So that's why you need to vote for a Liberal government. Again, you need somebody at the table who can advocate for this. So thanks.
Thank you, Chief Levasseur. And I acknowledge that NCN, as well as TCN, York Factory, Fox Lake, the First Nations involved in the kiosk development, War Lake, are models when it comes to ownership and revenue sharing. But of course, there is so much work to be done to improve that arrangement and as well to build it for better. But I also want to be clear when we're talking about the Liberal track record. First of all, Mark Carney is talking about fast-tracking resource development. That is code for not respecting Indigenous rights, not spending the right amount of time to work with First Nations, to respect the environment, to respect environmental regulations. But don't take it from just what he says now. Let's look at his track record. Mark Carney ran a business called Brookfield, a corporation, a very large corporation. And over the last 5 years, he led that corporation. And his company, Brookfield, has been accused of breaching Indigenous rights in 4 countries. Take it from the CBC, Mississauga First Nation in Canada, for Indigenous peoples in Maine in the US, in Colombia and Brazil. And many of those fights have been over hydroelectric dams that Mark Carney's company owns on their territory. And in Mississauga First Nations fight, they took Mark Carney's company to court, Brookfield. And do you know what his company argued in court? That they do not have the duty to consult. In 2023, Mark Carney's company argued in Ontario court that they do not have the duty to consult Mississauga First Nation. I spoke to the chief. That's where he said, they cut us off at the knees. This isn't a leader who understands partnership with First Nations. This isn't a leader who understands reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates. Thank you to the leadership for all the questions. Of course, we can go towards wrapping up our evening, and I just want to say on behalf of, of being a youth and being on the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Youth Council, I would like to thank the candidates for the information, for the voices they have shared today. And also thank you to everybody who has shared their concerns and their questions with the candidates. And very thankful to be here, and I want to thank AMC for asking me to come here today, and as a youth council member. And I guess with that being said, we can wrap up the evening with 2-minute closing remarks from the candidates, and we will start with Rebecca first. Thank you.
So it's a 2-minute wrap-up?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I want to close by saying that this is a huge privilege to be standing in front of you here today, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity. I don't take it lightly. I'm somebody that's, once I commit to something, I work really hard. I have my dad here with me. My dad has such a strong work ethic, and I get that from him. And so thank you, Dad, for teaching me that. I also want to say that as much as we've had the NDP representing this riding for the last 17 years, it's really important to recognize once again that although we have an advocate here, an ally, they'll never truly understand the experience of what it means to be First Nations. They will never have that lived experience. That is an experience that we have as Indigenous people, and why we keep fighting. And so when we think about reconciliation, under the banner of anti-racism, we have to recognize when allies need to step aside. We need to be the leaders in our own challenges and the problem solvers. So under the banner of reconciliation, an ally should know when to step back and start walking beside and then empowering other people. And so I think it's time for the NDP to step aside and allow a First Nations woman to take the seat, because to me that is reconciliation. It recognizes that we as Indigenous people are capable. We're capable of representing ourselves. We're capable of having a voice. We're capable of having a seat at the table. This is our homeland. We need to have more of our people in government at all levels, the federal, the provincial, in our own communities and in our municipalities. So it's time for change. It's time for new leadership. And the only way we're going to do that is to get out and vote. So when we talk about rock the vote, we have to honor our people.
Thank you very much.
For too long, for Ottawa, the North has been out of sight, out of mind. It has been my absolute honor to be able to fight with everything I have for Indigenous and Northern communities across our region. For communities across our region that have had so much taken from them, whose wealth from their territories has been taken by Canada, I should say, and certainly not returned in so many ways. This election, there is a lot at stake, and this is why I'm running. We have gotten results as the NDP over the last few years, but we know that there is so much more that needs to be done. We have one representative, 1 out of 14 in Manitoba, 1 out of 343 in Canada. We have to make our voice count. As I've traveled across our region, people ask me, who is this new leader, Mark Carney? And I think I've shared tonight that some of the issues that we're hearing about are definitely more troubling than we'd like. Cuts, no commitment to reconciliation, a dark corporate history in the last 5 years of violating Indigenous rights. This isn't a leader who understands reconciliation. On reconciliation, I would argue that Mark Carney's Liberals are part of the problem, not the solution. I'm proud to have worked with so many people in this room and people across our region. In this election, we need a strong voice, and a clear choice. With your support, I will continue to fight for our region. Don't let anyone tell you that your vote doesn't count or that
Time
it
is
doesn't
up.
make a difference.
Thank you.
All of our voices count, and I will keep up the fight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Grand Chiefs might want to have any closing remarks as well.
You just step up to the microphone if you'd like to say anything, Grand Chiefs, any of the Grand Chiefs? And if not, we'll have Grandmother Marie close. Sure. You want to have a brief closing remarks? 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute, yes. 1 minute. 1 minute.
We'll make it quick. We'll make it quick.
You're too soft-spoken.
I'll try and emulate you.
Okay. I want to thank everybody that came to participate this evening. The candidates, the moderators, our leadership. Oops. This podium is moving on me. I have a dinner at home that I missed, but I'm very happy that I came here to listen, to observe. And my takeaway from this is that this election is very important. You've heard our leadership talk about the need for change. That time for change is now. We cannot sit idly by and wait on governments to suddenly acquire a conscience. And just because some idiot in the South is going crazy in his country, it shouldn't be a motivation to do what is right. All of these issues we are raising and addressing, they should not exist in a country that does right by the original peoples of this land. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to the candidates and thank you to the leadership for, this space today. I'm grateful that we've been able to hear from some of the candidates. It's important that we get out and vote. April 28th, everyone online, everyone that's listening in, please get out and vote. And I know government is watching this. And when I say government, I know that there are individuals watching. So what we're saying is that you need to start listening to First Nations leadership. We're not going away. This is a partnership, whether you like it or not, and we are going to be here, and we will continue to get louder until our voices are heard. Miigwech.
Kanse ginaskumit na oga geno tu temag ni tsanak wagu maga na ka pewi chewi aga no tsagi sigak kichige gon again muchiga tegi was coming he was coming na mag ke gona get wi chigoak. I want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to Niki Ashton. Thank you so much for your thoughts, and also Rebecca Chartrand for her candidacy. And I just want to say thank you to all the leadership that have been here to listen to the messages and the platform, and all the people that are listening through the internet. I just want to say thank you for tuning in. This is a very interesting time we're living in, and we need to exercise our democratic right to vote. Your vote is sacred. Make it count. Go and vote. Tell your kukum to vote. Tell your mushum to vote. Tell your neighbors to vote. It's that important. Thank you for being here. Egusani, get it ask me now.
Thank you, Grand Chiefs.
Can I just say that advanced voting starts this Friday, April 18th to the 21st. That's 4 days to vote. So please go to your community centers that are near you where you voted before, because that's likely where you can vote. So April 18th, this Friday, to Monday, April 21st. Please get out and vote. You don't have to wait till April 28th. You could start voting this Friday.
Thank you. So to close off our evening in a good way, we would like to ask Marie Ballantyne to send us off with a prayer.
Do a closing prayer.
Thank you. Closing prayer. Yeah.
Closing prayer by the elder, please.
Ikusani, ni wako makantik. Kinas komit nao, kahitagi pituhtik. Kapinto tamagi, ipisitos kawai ko ni suiskui wakapang pahtatsik. Maka, kamamisito tawano, anagap matsi hikoya. Wila po kiskiti tamtan sawi at ispatik. Midutihiwin po tap mo tatain. Iku seka gimizuni ka no tan. Kitnan ochi. Kitse. Creator, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for everything that you have loaned to us, for we understand nothing belongs to us. Look after the two ladies that are running for a good cause, but also for your blessing for them. Guide them in the knowledge of wisdom, in the honesty, the seven natural laws. That's the ones that govern us. Look after them and look after the people that are getting up to vote in a good way, in a honest manner, in a humble manner. Creator, we ask you for your blessings. We say, aye, aye. Son.